So let me check if we are live already, and we'll start to roll straight away because it seems like we had issues. So let's see if it's there. Just very small 1 minute housekeeping, and I guess we can start rolling. Just a sec. I just want to make sure that it works and everyone can hear us, and then we can start. Okay, it seems it works. Okay. Okay. We're done. So, hello. I'm happy that I can hear you. Well, sorry guys, we are late, but actually we had some tech issues as we always have. So, it happens. I'm very happy we finally sorted it out, and now we can start the interview. I promise, I actually rose the expectations of people saying that, it's going to be better than the Kardashian show. So we have to keep up with those expectations, I'm afraid. So yeah, everyone who's watching, if you want the comments and the questions to be seen, please come and leave them on my Facebook page, because you may be seeing it on different timelines and stuff like that. So do that, please, so we make sure that we address them. If no, we'll just, do the interview as we usually do, just free flow conversation about stuff that we usually cover. So welcome to the Crypto Talks podcast. Today I have a very interesting guest. Today I'm talking to Bitcoin entrepreneur. I mean, we usually talk about lifestyle entrepreneurs and laptop entrepreneurs. I've never had a Bitcoin entrepreneur on my show. She's a Bitcoin entrepreneur. She's also a podcast host and a stand-up comedian. So welcome, Margaux. Margaux Avedisian is here, and I'm very happy to have you over.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so actually, this show is relatively new, and the way I was picking up guests was just going back to my audience and asking them who are the coolest early adopters of Bitcoin and crypto and blockchain. And I was surprised to be thrown so many names, actually, because I thought it will be very hard to find interesting people in that field, but apparently there are many. So I'm very happy we got introduced, and let's talk about the odds. What were the odds of having two women in blockchain, both Armenian, in different places of the world, being introduced by someone completely, different, whom I don't know. I personally didn't know the person, so I don't know if you did. So that's like the power of internet, right?
Well, nothing really surprises me anymore. So, but it's great to link up. I mean, more than
Okay, Steve. So let's talk about, you've been into crypto world, and you've been dealing with Bitcoin and blockchain since 2012. That's like really, really early compared to, I hear people saying that it's still early for us now. 2012 was really early. So tell us, how did you get into that?
Well, I almost started mining in 2011. I lived in San Francisco, and I had a bunch of friends that are nerds, which is not really surprising in San Francisco. And I had a startup, and I had free office space, and I said to my co-founder, why don't we just mine Bitcoin? We have free electricity. But then I thought that'd be kind of a jerk thing to do, so we didn't do that. And then I met someone at a party. They were relaunching the first American Bitcoin exchange, TradeHill, and I kind of jumped at the opportunity to get involved in something that I could see being really actually world changing. And it's amazing to see how far it's come from, Bitcoin, this one concept, to now blockchain, which is disrupting pretty much every industry you can imagine.
Okay, yeah, well, I mean, it's easy now for many to understand that that's really a big thing, and that's, you know, that's what's coming. But back in 2011, I suppose it was very hard to predict what was going to happen and to, you know, think that it's going to be the next big thing. So, what made you realize that it's something exciting, it's something that's going to grow, and, you know, what made you get involved in it?
Well, it's really, Bitcoin started after the financial crisis, and we saw how banks were manipulating people, manipulating numbers, and really the cause of downfall, people losing a lot of money. And Bitcoin was something that wasn't controlled by a central authority. There's this, it's peer to peer. I was really interested in maybe the remittance aspect, which is essentially poor people sending money back to their families in other countries, and they're just charged an exorbitant amount. And having this technology where you could essentially get paid almost instantaneously, and it's not a promise of money, it is actual money, it's digital gold, was something that didn't exist before. I mean, this was really a game changer because it was this technology that really took out the middleman, that really took out that level of corruption, and had this transparency involved, and could bring really technology back to the people opposed to a few corporations controlling everything. And during the time, I did believe that this was going to become something big. I remember thinking how I felt very fortunate to be on the ground floor of something and getting to help influence it. And even though everyone thought we were crazy, and really in most cases in the very beginning, people never even heard the word Bitcoin. So then once the news started talking about it, that was probably the most exciting part, because then it becomes more real when you're getting it out to the masses and people have now heard this term Bitcoin. I mean, people still don't really know what it is, and we do have a long way to go, but the explosion of this technology that is way far beyond even Bitcoin is just really amazing to see, and be part of.
Oh, amazing. So you mentioned something that is very interesting. You said that many people even thought that you were crazy, but you know, you just, it's very hard to keep on going when people don't believe or don't grasp what you're doing, but you know, to still keep believing and moving forward. So what was that kept you? What was it, like the like-minded people that were around you, or was it this belief and you know, persistence that it's gonna work out and this is the thing that is gonna grow?
I guess it's just the little tiny milestones, right? So when I first got involved, we were raising money, and so I went to people I knew and investors and trying to find people who actually heard of Bitcoin. And then even just finding someone who's heard of Bitcoin, like that was a win. And then talking to someone and getting them into it, or when we were raising money, or even getting meetings with huge VC firms like Andreessen Horowitz and Founders Fund. It's those little steps that make you kind of reinforce what you're doing. And even if it was a no, at least we got to the point of having a meeting. And then it was just, little things that were encouraging, and raising money. That's, big milestone. And, maybe someone else getting involved in it, or maybe like a bank saying something about it, or even getting a meeting with a bank. So being in it, you got to see the tide starting to change a little bit, or even just me explaining it to someone and now they have an interest in it. And whether or not that turned into something permanent, it still was kind of lighting a candle that then could be shared with other people. And I mean, it's really interesting for me to hear sometimes people saying how they got into Bitcoin because of me, and uh, and now they're actually working in Bitcoin. So uh, it's just, I mean, you do have doubts. I mean, I remember being like, am I crazy? Is this really that crazy? But you just do something. I don't know, as an entrepreneur, you just do something. And the fact that so many people aren't doing it is actually even more encouraging, because you're doing something different. And living in Silicon Valley, it just gets so monotonous and so boring. And where I met the people starting Trade Hill was in another photo sharing app office holiday party. And it's just like, how many photo sharing apps do we need? And so it was this culmination of all these people having startups in Silicon Valley, solving problems that don't exist, and then being part of something that actually can really, on a large global effect, change so many things. So you just have to keep going and seeing all the little wins, the little tide turning, and just power through, because it's something that you really do know has a benefit.
So what do you think about, I'm just trying to imagine the early adopters, the few people who were around you when you were just starting and gathering around the concept. Was there any personality trend around that? Were they the rebels? Were they the crazy people? Was there anything in common that put you like a personality type that is more fit towards being in such an environment from the very beginning? Because now it's a hot topic. Everyone, it's fashionable. Everyone wants to get into it. Obviously, it's easy and it's already sort of a proven concept. But back then, I presume some specific people were the ones who were courageous enough to get into, right?
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of libertarians, and I guess I didn't really know that much about libertarianism until I got involved in it. And there are definitely a lot of things that I don't really believe in, in that kind of political leaning. But I would say a lot of them were very anti-taxes or anti-government, and their kind of solution was to disengage from government and make it not have any sort of influence. And then, I mean, being an entrepreneur, you can't really be risk adverse. And I would say early blockchain people were even more risk adverse because it's so taking a chance in a very very kind of strange industry. And yeah, I would just say there were a lot of people who were really into the notion of being kind of off the grid, or got burned by the government, or got burned by taxes. And it wasn't why I was involved in it, but it was something I started to see. And if you look at some of the people who've been in it even longer than I have, their message is very still to that vein of, anti-government leanings, which is kind of the opposite direction blockchain's going, because there is regulation involved. When I started, we were very much concerned with regulation and not playing in this gray area, or kind of figuring out, okay, worst case scenario, what would the government say? Because what people, I think, sometimes erroneously forget is that this isn't like starting a startup where you're, starting a transportation company or food delivery company, where the regulations are not as stringent as in finance. Like, you will go to jail if you're just doing whatever it is you want. And there are a lot of early people, or not a lot, but there's definitely a handful of early people who have gone to jail because they played a little too fast and too loose. So it is something to be aware of, for sure.
Okay, I see. So now, so many years later, do you think it's still an early stage? I believe it's still sort of, not really a mass thing. It's something very specific still and quite niche. But do you think we're getting closer to the time that, more and more people know about it, more and more people are interested into getting into the field? Do you think like the mass adoption is still too far, or where are we in that respect?
I think as soon as it's really easy for people to either buy Bitcoin or alts or use these platforms, that's when we're going to see mass adoption. We're seeing institutional money starting to come in, and that's really kind of one of the first signs before mass adoption. And I think I saw something about an announcement with people are going to be able to more easily with retirement stuff buy money. There's Bitcoin IRA, which you could actually roll your 401k into and buy Bitcoin that they hold, which is actually pretty cool because if you take it out before you're 65 and use it for education or buying your first home, you're not taxed on it. Because right now, Bitcoin and cryptos are taxed pretty heavily with capital gains. But I don't think it's super far off. We're already seeing businesses that are in large companies, Fortune 500 companies using blockchain, and I think it's just a matter of time before it really hits the consumer world, because that's what these ICOs. A lot of them are really creating platforms that are peer-to-peer in whatever industry it is, and having these tokens in order to use the platform. And as soon as one is up and running and it makes sense for people to want to buy these tokens in order to use, that will be it. But I kind of have a feeling it's going to be with one of these more established companies that we've seen doing ICOs. Like we've seen Opskins, which is has the market share of game skins in the world, and that's like a $500 billion industry, something like that. And then another one is Unicorn. It's one of the largest esports betting, and they both are doing or did ICOs, and they already have a ton of users, and so it's cheaper in some of the cases for the users to use these tokens or to be able to transmit across borders or not have to pay credit card fees. And that makes sense. Like if you can save money, people are going to use it. You already have people using your platform. So I really think it's going to be a matter of time. And in most cases, people aren't even going to realize they're using crypto.
It's interesting. When you mentioned ICO, you mentioned two components that I would like to talk about those, because first of all, you said that the two you mentioned were very big and established companies, which sort of makes me recall the factor of trust during the ICOs, because now ICOs end up having quite a bad name and reputation. People are very skeptical because of the scams and, the risk factor, etc. So basically the trust is very important. Probably that is why these big companies already had been established and had the reputation, and it was easier to believe in them and to invest in their ICOs maybe.
Yeah, well, they were doing ICOs, one, to raise money, but two, for the example of Opskins, it's sometimes when people are buying these virtual goods and games, they're going to pay up to like 20%, 30% for credit card fees. So it's makes more sense. It's cheaper for people to use their token. And so that helps their margins as well. So, or for security aspects is another reason. Augme is another company. They're connecting their management platform, connecting Internet of Things. And they've been around for a while too, and they've raised money from like Tim Draper and Siemens and Rothberg Ventures and big names, and they're using blockchain because it allows for security. And we've seen all these hacks and stuff. But to do an ICO, I mean, I like companies that are already established, that have a track record, that have revenue, or at least or maybe even being profitable. But if they already have this track record, that is a safer bet. But now to do ICOs, I've been doing ICOs for over a year now, and I don't even know how many I've done, maybe 30, maybe more than that.
Wow. Okay.
It's a lot harder now to stand out. You have to have so many components. You have to have a really strong team. Your background has to be relevant to what your ICO is about. You need advisors that are essentially vouching for you in the crypto community and also in the more mainstream world. You need to have something more than an idea. You have to have a white paper. You have to be doing something that actually has a use case. And there's so many other things to think about, like how many tokens, what's your distribution method. And so it's even though there's a lot of ICOs coming out, there's so many loose ends that you need to pretty much tie up, and so much competition that it's not some kid in the basement anymore with an idea. It's in a lot of cases you have an MVP, or you have a partnership with a company or even a country. We have a company, Impact PPA, and they are renewable energy, and they're partnering with Haiti to help power cities there with renewable energy. And it's still devastated after the hurricane they had, forever ago. So it takes a lot more than trust. It takes trust from a lot of different components at this point in the game.
Yeah, I mean, it's becoming, as you mentioned, it's becoming harder and harder, and more and more ICOs are coming out every single day, and it's becoming even harder to pick those you would eventually want to invest in because of all those components, especially if someone is not within the field and not so knowledgeable and haven't started early. It's a challenge to sort of, we get overwhelmed with with all these components and with the way we're supposed to evaluate that, and with all the resources that are out there. Like there's so much information out there. So my follow-up question is, like, if someone who is starting and wants to learn, what is the learning curve like, and where to go to for information? Because it feels like, I started this few months ago, and I feel like an Alice going down the rabbit hole. It just takes you there, and you in a high speed, and you don't even know where it takes you to. So how to sort of look at this?
Well, that's a good segment into one of the other projects I'm working on called coolpool.me. And essentially what we do is we help find the ICOs that we believe in, and we help give access to pre-ICOs. So the ICO, they're selling tokens, you're getting a discount, and depending on how soon it is that you're selling it. So pre-ICO is what you really need to be doing before you do an ICO, and in a lot of cases a pre-ICO. So that's at a deeper discount, and the more money you bring in, the more discount. Now we're seeing a lot of these being more accredited investors, and to get into that, that's pretty hard if you're not in the space. So we put together a pool where we look at, I get inundated with ICOs all the time. And since I've done PR for so many of them and most of the big ones, I kind of know what to look at this point. So we put together memos with all the information. We usually negotiate a larger discount, and people can subscribe for the information. And we send out the memos, and if you want to be part of it, then you can invest, and we pool the money together, so then you get an even greater discount. But if you're just looking for ICOs, I mean, I'm more interested in kind of the later stage, not, you just have an idea and you threw a white paper together. Usually businesses have already existed, or they have team members who have done something notable. Like an example would be VideoCoin, which was started by Halsey Miner, who started CNET and Google Talk and Salesforce. Like, he's been in tech for a very long time with extremely, extremely successful companies. And now he's created a platform for distributed video hosting. So that, there you have a person that's really well known and has a lot of success. Or you have, a company that's been invested, VCs invested in them. So you know that they're doing some due diligence, and they also have a lot more responsibility because they have people kind of overseeing what they're doing. So definitely look at the team, definitely look at the advisors, definitely see where they are stage-wise. When do they plan on launching? Do they have any partnerships? Who are they? And, just kind of looking at what you would look at for a traditional company, except it really matters the people and advisors that are vouching for them. And they probably, in most cases, should have people on the blockchain side and people on the more mainstream side. And then, is it something that's actually needed? Is it something that's going to change the world? And how difficult is it to do it? I can't tell you how many companies that I see who want to give banking to the unbanked, which is something I'm very passionate about and is really important. But how are you going to do that? Just because you're creating a blockchain and tokens and saying that, how are you possibly going to get to people in developing nations? What's the incentive? What kind of phones is this going to be able to even work on phones? If it's built on Ethereum, you can't really do anything on mobile. So there's a lot of things to think about. Like, is this possible? Is this a team that can do it? What's their plan? You know, are they doing a partnership with the UN? Because that would instill a lot of confidence to me that, okay, this could be possible. Are they getting press? I think that's another main thing. Reporters are very skeptical about writing about ICOs now. It's really difficult to get in. So all these things that I've mentioned are things that reporters are looking at. So if they're getting press, not paid for press, but if they're getting some level of press, then that's usually a good indication, because they're very picky in most cases on who they're writing about, because they're worried about pumping up a coin. So that's another thing that I would be looking at. And also that usually means that they have a PR firm or working with us. Excuse me. But yeah, and it's not cheap to do an ICO. You have to do it. There's a lot.
Yeah. Not at all. And I totally understand what you're saying. And, you know, it's nice that you broke down all the elements that, you know, one should look at. But from, you know, the way it sounds is like, you know, if you are really passionate about something, and if you are really love the idea of the project that is out there for an ICO, that by itself is not enough to you know, to be emotional enough and just to invest, because there are so many other components that, you know, if they are not in place, that project simply won't happen even if they raise the money, right?
Well, yeah, but also, I mean, if you're investing in a speculative way, just because, you know, it could go up in value if you want to play it like that. You know, that I'm a fan of, you know what, you can put a little bit of money in and see how it goes, and maybe you can make that money back, but you don't have to be investing a lot of money in these things. Like, I invest like very little usually in ICOs, just to get like put a little bit in. And I mean, you can put in, I mean, I haven't looked at Ether price, but even like 1 Ether, half an Ether, like, you know, very little part of Bitcoin, just to get involved a little bit. And not even just ICOs. Like, if you go on Bittrex, which is an exchange I really like, it's very secure. They list an extreme amount of different altcoins, and you can just put a tiny bit of money in and buy, you know, some tokens that have already come out. And I really think it's an opportunity just to even learn investing in a lot of these cryptos. And investing doesn't mean you're putting in your life savings. It means you can be putting in $50, and that can turn into something.
We don't recommend putting life savings, right?
Yeah. No, but I do know someone who put in, he scraped together $100,000 and put it in the Ethereum token sale, and that was around like 3 cents or 15 cents for an Ether token, and now it's like, I think, around 300. So, I mean, he sold it at 20, but there are stories like that, which then you're like,
there are many. Yeah, there are many stories like that. And that's, let's talk about that. Like, you know, not the stories exactly, but like the mindset. There are all these coins are so volatile. They just jump around even within the day. There is such a big difference. And there are some people who sort of, you know, end up checking the rate every single day and sort of getting heart attacks and getting really, you know, panicked, or doing, making the wrong decisions just because they are in a panic mode. So, you know, what is the right mindset? How you should approach these investments that you're having out there?
Well, I mean, it's kind of counter to what I've been saying about everything, but in a way, I don't think of it as real money. And so there's definitely times when I'm like, oh, I should have sold this, or I'm not a really good trader. I accidentally buy and sell things. So I'm not the best one to ever give trading advice, but it's, I don't know. I mean, if you're trading and doing all that stuff, that's very different. But I mean, just putting it in and not really looking at it, or looking at it every once in a while, but just know that it's going to fluctuate a lot. Like, you could have it could go up by, you know, a whole decimal point and then drop the next day. So you just never know. It is very volatile, but I don't know. I recommend not really looking at it close in time. You look at it, now, or like a year ago, and now, like, you're doing really well. Or if you look at it, 6 months ago. But it's one of those things where I prefer to be long because it's just, I don't know, it's something that I kind of more believe in. But
yeah, I see what you mean. So, I mean, since we covered so many serious topics, let's talk about something that really, interests me. You are Bitcoin entrepreneur. You have, so you have helped with so many ICOs. You have your own company. And then at the same time, we have this nice title of stand-up comedian. How did that come into place? I mean, as far as I know, it came together with the Bitcoin and blockchain involvement, and they moved parallel. So what's the story about the stand-up comedian part?
Well, I mean, as a kid, I always wanted to do it, and I did it like one of my family once. And then I was in a Lyft car, Lyft, and my driver was a stand-up comedian, and I said I always wanted to do that, and so we exchanged numbers, and he's like, okay, in 2 weeks you're gonna go here and do a set, and so I wrote some jokes and I did it, and then after that I went to the party, and then I met the people that I ended up joining and starting Trade Hill with. So it literally was in the same day. And I was a new comedian then and trying to do this startup and doing comedy. And I every once in a while will combine the two. So I think you read the article where I was at CoinDesk Consensus. And so I did a bunch of different blockchain jokes, and I could be really nichey and talk about things that regular people don't know about and just make fun of the industry. And I think I'm going to be performing at CES doing that at Digital Money, which I believe is on December or January 7th or 9th. And so there's going to be a blockchain panels there. But yeah, I don't know. It's fun to kind of get out of the whole, what is it, like the echo chamber, because it's like a really dramatic industry. I mean, this is not like any other industry. Everyone airs all their grievances online. There's, Bitcoin civil war going on, and different factions, and people accusing other people of stuff, and it's just so dramatic, and it's very weird. So it's kind of easy to make fun of, but I don't know. You don't see any other industries being so public about what they think about either where they're even working. I mean, we've seen people who are working at a company coming out talking against it, or dealing with each other, or it blows my mind. So it's very ripe to be made fun of, because this is not like any other industry in the world in terms of the drama involved.
Yeah, but as you mentioned, since it's very specific audience and community, how do they react to those kind of jokes? I mean, what is the reaction? I presume it's different from Yeah.
Well, I mean, when you feel like you're in the inner circle and you understand what someone's talking about, that's when comedy really has the biggest impact. And so when I'm making fun of things that people understand because they're in this scene, it is really funny to them, because they're in on the joke. And I still get people who talk to me about certain jokes that I said, and it really doesn't work so much with other people. But I don't know. It's fun to be able to talk about and make fun of things that are so absurd in this industry. And it's just, I mean, everyone's kind of a character and kind of weird, but within the echo chamber, it's like where the nerds are king. And so sometimes they just needed to be knocked down a little bit, I guess, or reminded how absurd things are.
Okay. I mean, I want to raise this topic. I really don't like it, but since it's so discussed, I just want to know your views on that. We have so many discussions these days about women in tech, women in Silicon Valley, the controversial topics. How does it feel being sort of, one of the very few? And I think that, there are even less women in blockchain than in tech in general, for example. So do you have any issues connected to that? How do you look at that? Do you even think that there is an issue at all?
Well, it's funny you say that, because I was on a podcast earlier today, and he said that there are more women in crypto than in other parts of tech.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What is the reality? I don't know. I mean, that was my presumption. Maybe I'm wrong. What's the reality since you're there?
There's actually a lot of women now getting involved in it. And what's actually really interesting is that the community is very supportive of women, I have to say. For example, CoinJust Desk messaged me today, and they said they wanted to be 50% women writing for the year in review and 50% men. What other tech industry is going out of their way to make sure that women are represented? And it's actually, I think, a benefit to be a woman in this industry. And people aren't, because we're doing something so different and so disruptive, and it hasn't been around for a while. I think there isn't this kind of really cemented male patriarchy. That doesn't mean that most of the things are with men. It just means that there isn't this ingrained feeling in this industry that's anti-women. And I've seen a lot of positive things about, like, oh, let's highlight our woman co-founder, or wanting to get women involved, or trying to be supportive of that. So I've definitely seen a lot more women doing it, and I think a lot of that has to do with also because blockchain can be integrated in pretty much any industry. It's not people coming over from an industry they're an expert in and then adding the blockchain element in, opposed to being a blockchain person and then adding a different industry in. But it is, of course, there's way more men than women. There's not that many women comparatively, to fashion industry or something. But we're getting there, and I do think that it is more of a welcoming tech environment than not. But it is, I think for women, there's a barrier of entry because, a lot of times we want to be experts or perfect and understand something so completely before we even try. And that's not how men are. They just go in and they just start learning. And
that's true.
I meet so many women and they're like, I don't really get it. And it's like, I didn't even know what an exchange was. And I joined starting an exchange, like you just figure it out and learn while you're doing it and just know what your strengths are. But for the women out there, you don't have to be an expert. It's not about being an expert. It's about willing to learn and take a chance and use what skills and resources you have to create some sort of benefit and learn while you're doing that. That's the best way to learn is through experience, right? And if you aren't putting yourself out there to gain experience, then how are you ever going to really learn?
Yeah, absolutely. So to wrap it up, I know that many people are giving various different predictions in terms of where this is going, what it will bring, what the future is connected to blockchain and crypto and what it brings to the world. So how do you see this?
With what's going to happen with blockchain?
Yeah, what is the future? What the future will bring in that field?
Yeah, I think that eventually all major corporations are going to be integrating this in some way. How many times are banks or large companies like Target going to be hacked and exposing user data until they're like, we need to actually use technology that would really prevent that? So I think blockchain is going to be integrated in all different kinds of ways. Some ways we're not even going to see. I think the technology is something that is undeniable at this point. What blockchain is going to win? I don't really think there's going to be one. I think there's going to be many depending on what it is. And I think Bitcoin is a really good store of value. And the more forks they do, the more money you make holding on to it because you get the other coin that's created. So I mean, we're still in the early days, but it's just something that is here to stay. Like there's no really denying that. And I also think there's too much money involved in some of these cases that it's almost in a way too big to fail. I mean, I could be wrong about that, but I don't ever see Ethereum failing. But I think it's going to be more. I don't think it's going to be dominant in everything. I think it's going to have its place, and a lot of these blockchains are going to start having its place instead of just being one. I mean, we're not really part of a society that just has one anything.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, I mean, that was very, valuable, and you dropped loads of knowledge bombs in there. It was very nice interview. I totally enjoyed that. Thanks a lot for coming over. And so basically, yeah, I mean, I think we covered a lot, and I'm sure that for someone who's just starting getting into this, we had the argumentation that it's worth exploring, and there's loads of ways to gain from this. So thanks a lot for coming over. Thank you, and happy to connect.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Okay.